We can vehemently disagree with someone's ideology and yet still passionately pursue their humanity.
Expanding possibilities, the mindset zone.
I'm your host, Melikian. I'm here to support you, increase your impact while preventing burnout. The Mindset Zone is a place to pause, increase your self-awareness, and embrace the experimentation mindset. Find more resources, including information about the Mindset Zone book and audiobook at mindset.zone. Yes, instead of .com is .zone. Today, our special guest is Justin Jones-Fosu, and Justin is an amazing speaker, author, and social entrepreneur. He's the founder and CEO of Work Meaningful, and is passionate about helping organizations and individuals take ownership of their mindset, purpose, and performance. He's also the author of Your Why Matters Now, The Inclusive Mindset, and his latest book is I Respectfully Disagree: How to Have Difficult Conversations in a Divided World. Welcome to the Mindset Zone, Justin.
I am super excited to be on here with you.
We met in person recently to the National Speaker Association, the big influence conference, and was great
Yeah.
to see you there, radiating your energy and connecting with people. And I'm so thrilled about your new book, I Respectfully Disagree, because I think it's so timely. So let's start there, because your work is all about having more respectful disagreements while
Yes.
still valuing our humanity. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I give all the shout outs and credit to my mom. My mom was the one who planted these seeds in me of valuing humanity. I credit her, and later on in life, I interviewed her for my last two books. And I was, Mom, where did this whole thing come from you? And she shared a story with me that was really powerful. My mom was one of the first Black female air traffic controllers in the Air Force. And she shared that there were sometimes she would be stationed in Japan for 2 years. And in that same 2 year time frame, there were some soldiers who never left base. And she was dead set on making sure my brother and I were not like that, that we would leave our metaphorical home base to experience the beauty of people and cultures around us. And so we would early on go to events we didn't know a lot about, and even ones that we disagreed with. And I remember saying, Mom, like, why are we even here? We don't agree with this. Like, why are we here? And what she was doing was planting these seeds of humanity in me. And that has really carried forward and I think germinated and grown into what we have today with I Respectfully Disagree. And it's really about the statement or the premise of this is that we can vehemently disagree with someone's ideology and yet still passionately pursue their humanity. And in this book, we go through and tell people how to do it.
So tell us a little bit more about that. So how can we do that?
Yeah, it's I try to summarize that in a full book process, but we go through the 5 pillars, and the 5 pillars work through ways to practically engage. Pillar number 1 is challenge your perspective, where it happens before any disagreement even occurs. Be the student is pillar number 2, where it's where we focus more on listening and learning rather than lecturing. Pillar number 3 is cultivate your curiosity, and it's where we fill in the gaps more with curiosity rather than conclusions. Pillar number 4 is seek the gray, where it's looking for common ground, finding the nuance of what a lot of people try to create very black and white scenarios. And then pillar number 5 is agree to respect, that it's always our choice to respect. So in the book, we walk through the 5 pillars in practical ways, sharing the research behind it. But that's in a nutshell, the focus on how we can respectfully disagree with others.
And I love this. You are giving a concrete roadmap on how doing this. So from you to then, how to bridge the divide there.
Yeah.
And I know that you also do a ton of keynoting and public speaking about this. Of course, everybody should get the book, read the book. And I would love to invite you here just to summarize. Let's start with the first step, challenge your perspective.
Yeah, challenge your perspective is the last pillar that was added, but it's that first pillar. As we look through the literature and research, one of the things that we found often missing from conversations around conflict and challenging conversations was, what did you do before it even happens? Right? What's the pre-work? Because most of the time the conversation entered in, you're in a conversation with somebody, you're disagreeing, they say this, you say this, what do you do? Right? Breathe deeply, and which are very valuable things. But we said we want to approach this from the heart perspective. How do we help increase the number of respectful disagreements that we have with others? And we said it has to start before any disagreement even occurs. And that's why challenge your perspective is powerful. One great example of this is what we call the Circles of Grace Challenge. And in Circles of Grace Challenge is something that I created for myself, but wasn't even for everyone else initially, because I realized I wasn't living up to my mom's ideals. And in the Circles of Grace Challenge, what I do is every 6 to 12 months, and we encourage other people to consider to do this as well. Every 6 to 12 months, I go to events, I engage with people or engage in experiences in either which I don't know a lot about or that I disagree with. And I'm going asking two questions. One, what did I learn about myself as I experienced them? And what did I learn about these events, experiences, and or people as I engaged them? And so that's one great way that we can build up our muscles to start challenging our perspective.
I love this. And this connects one with the story that you started at the beginning. Your mom, I think she was challenging her perspective and your perspective of her kids, making sure that you were exposed to different perspectives, different experiences. And
Yes.
the other bridge here that connects a lot with this podcast, the Mindset Zone, because we speak a lot about the growth mindset. And
Yes.
yes, and what I think you are advocating here is the cultivation of the growth mindset, of expanding the possibilities of their beginner's mind, of learning something new and be exposed intentionally to how can I stretch myself and be more flexible in my perspectives.
100%, right? As we put that beginner's mind, it allows us to operate in the vast amount of research. And we love Carol Dweck's work, leaning into a lot of the growth mindset work and all the other people who've contributed to that space. Because that really is what it's about, is that we can grow, right? We can challenge. Like sometimes we feel like there's this fixed perspective that we have. And the more and more I learn and meet people, the more and more it begins to expand. And so that's why we encourage a very strategic way to go about this, because it continues to challenge our mindset. And if we don't know something, guess what? We don't know it yet, right? The power of the not
Yes.
yet. And that's
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah.
And so tell us, just to finish this pillar one, an example of one of these experiences that you went with the purpose of expanding or challenging your perspective.
Yeah. So one of my most pivotal Circles of Grace challenges was with police officers. It was really within a tough time within our society, and some young black men had died at the hands of police officers. And I was rightfully so very upset of what was happening and engaging. But what I realized is I was creating a narrative that was one-sided without actually engaging with others who represented what I was creating. And so I decided, said, hey, Justin, I disagree with some things I'm hearing, and so let me lean in. And so I did a police ride along. I started talking to friends, having conversations, started reading articles, engaging, and I realized that we were asking way too much from our police officers. And one of the things that we definitely agree with is that proximity breeds empathy. And the closer I got, the more I understood the challenges and unique moments, and that there are a lot of police officers who love the communities that they serve and are in it. And it challenged me from creating a whole narrative about a whole group of people rather than engaging them with the beginner's mind and realizing that, hey, like any scenario, like professors or other things, yes, there's bad actors. There's some bad professors who are tenured and need to be removed. But it doesn't mean all professors are bad. And that was one really powerful challenge for me.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. And I think this takes us so well to the second pillar here, that is being a student, because what you were embodying was being a student, learning. So speak a little bit more about that second pillar.
Yeah, so when we go into these disagreements, this is really where pillar two is where when we're face to face with someone and we are in a disagreement or we're on the phone or even online. But when you're the student, I go into this disagreement, or if I notice that this person is saying something that really is disrupting my emotional state, I have to make a decision. One, do I want to engage? And if I choose to engage, that I should be the student first. So instead of going in with, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about X, where I'm now lecturing, I don't allow myself to be open. And so when you're the student, you approach this of what can I learn from this person? And I literally will say, right, some of the psychology work around cognitive diffusion is talking to myself in the third person, right? Hey, Justin, what can you learn from this person? And as I approach it in that way, I now approach them in the posture of, I wonder what I can learn. And not only that, but one practical lean in is realizing that it might not even be just that one conversation. And that's why we advocate the what we call one meaningful connection per week and or one meaningful connection per month. Well, it may require multiple conversations with this person, right? Not just one to talk about this area of disagreement. I mean, imagine you and your roommate or a spouse, and you're talking, you're having conversations, right? For those who are listening, and you're disagreeing on something, you're not like, oh, we had one conversation, everything's solved now. No, that's just often not the case. It's why when we're the student, we approach it like I go to class multiple times. I engage multiple times to learn. And that's what be the student is. We approach it with that perspective of what can I learn?
And I love that the challenge your perspective by the way that you describe is almost like going to the gym of mental fitness,
Yes.
strength, and to expand and to become more resilient and more open. And
Yeah.
then being the student is more in the moment, but it's also
Yes.
that understanding that is not one and done, that
Yeah.
is a process. And then let's move to pillar number 3, the cultivate your curiosity.
Yeah, so I love this pillar for this reason. It's that I know Justin often fills in the blanks, right? I was that person and I'm recovering from you saying something. I want to finish what you're going to say, right? Because, I was trying to prove my worth for so many years. And I realized that the more time I spent trying to prove my worth, the less time I could simply be my worth. And so when you cultivate your curiosity, it's where you're asking more questions. You're engaging and challenging what we call the double Dutch style of communication. And for those who don't know what double Dutch is, it's generally two ropes and that people are putting, somebody's waiting to jump in, right? And that's how we often communicate. We're waiting to jump in, waiting for them to take a breath before we actually hear their full thought and their perspective. And so we encourage people to challenge that double Dutch style communication, what we call the power of three. And what we found in our research is that most people listen to the power of one or power of two. And really what that means is that they're not either asking questions or they're stopping at maybe one or maybe even two questions versus that third level of the conversation. And so when you listen to the third level and I was like, hey, how's your day today? And you're like, oh, my day's fine. I'm like, my day's fine too, right? That's the power of one. If I went beyond that and said, oh, what made your day fine? And you're like, oh, I was talking to this very interesting bald-headed guy, right? And I'm like, oh, I know that bald-headed guy. That's power of two. But if I extended it, it's like, oh, what made him interesting? That's where we're starting to get to this place of understanding, and we're challenging our brains because our brains want to conserve energy for things it thinks it doesn't know. And so it categorizes second and third-hand information for future use. And so right before we get to know someone or know their story, we end up taking the exit on them. And we end up filling in the gaps with our own conclusions rather than genuine curiosity. And so that's what we're advocating for, is continuing to ask questions in a way to gain clarity and better understanding.
I love that. I love that. And understanding the complexity and the different levels of communication and how we put our own agenda on it and how we can open to different perspectives, all about that expanding of the possibilities here. And I think that so beautifully takes us to the fourth pillar, that is seek the gray.
Yeah. And seek the gray, we know that there might be several shades of gray I can't tell you how many, or I might get in trouble on your podcast. But the interesting aspect of Seek the Gray is that everything we think is black and white, right? It's binary, 0 and 1, but there's actually more gray, there's more nuance. This is why I love even the research in the psychology of the illusion of asymmetric insight, which simply says that I think that you're just really easy to understand. I get what you're saying, but I'm just really complex. I'm just hard to get. And that's how we treat these conversations. We treat it in a way that I really understand you, but you can't really fully understand me. And when we seek the gray, we seek the nuance of the conversation. One is that we find common ground. We ask the questions, right? So if we're talking about, say, gun rights and gun control, our common ground might be, wow, I really appreciate that we both care about the safety of our families. That's a better starting ground when you're seeking the gray, rather than, how could you even stand for that? How can you believe that? And it doesn't allow people to engage with us in meaningful ways. The other aspect of Seek the Gray is when we're identifying ways to find that common understanding, right? Even if we disagree with it, to better understand how they got there. And so when we ask the question, that's why I love Oprah's book with the neuroscientist, What Happened to You, right? Because it changes the paradigm from what's wrong with you to what happened, right? Like, how did they get there? What's the gray in their story? And that's the beauty of Seek the Gray.
Love it. And I always remember when we were speaking the first time that you called attention in the cover of your book that between the black and the white in the cover, there is a gray line to remember about that seek the gray and about the importance of nuance and the power of it. Because even now, when you were giving the example of the question, what is going on with you or what has happened to you, changes the perspective of how we look and how we are open to understanding and to the curiosity. I love how these pillars connect with one another. And finally, you have the agree to respect. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so most people say for pillar 5, let's just agree to disagree. And we want to challenge that whole notion, right? Because I've seen many people agree to disagree very respectfully, right? It becomes dismissive. And so agree to respect, it challenges us to say, it's always our choice, right? It's always our choice to choose to respect the person. Now, what we do dive deep into the book is that we talk about what we call golden respect. And we've redefined or really been a common definition of respect, because respect was all over the place. Like, some people talked about respect from a place of honor. Some people talked about respect from a place of, I'm a leader, so you should respect me. And really what we boil it down to is that everyone is worthy of value, dignity, and respect. And what does that look like? That one way that we can agree to respect is by leaving people fully acknowledged. And this is where I love, Jean Zhao, Stanford professor, came up with this whole concept called thank you because. And we call it the 3 ways to fully acknowledge someone. Is that I can fully acknowledge someone whether I 100% agree, partially agree, or 100% disagree. And full acknowledgement is simply like this. Hey, Anna, I just want to say thank you because in this conversation today, you taught me something that I didn't know before. Hey, number 2. Hey, Anna, wow, you mentioned 3 things today. I just want to thank you because number 2 really resonated with me to dive in deeper to engage some research. Or number 3, Anna, wow, I can tell this conversation is really tough. And I just want to say thank you because you chose to lean in. You have to. Now, and not once did I say I fully agree with you or anything about agreeing. I simply fully acknowledged you in the midst of that. And those are one of the ways that the body of research around conversational receptiveness allows us to have more conversations with people we disagree with. When we're disagreeing, the person takes a moment to say, hey, wow, thank you for helping me see how you got there. Or, wow, let me listen. We don't do that because we immediately want to jump in and say, no, because that's wrong. Or have you read this paper? Or have you seen this research? Rather than agreeing to respect. Now, this is pivotal, is that it's at this step that we have to make a decision. Are we going to share our perspective or not? And that is the case that I think is really profound, is that there's some ways to agree to respect, even as we choose to share our own perspective.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, in sharing our perspective, one, there's sometimes people have said some things to me, and I'm just like, I don't need to say anything. I don't need to try to refute it or challenge it. It might have been what we call a low commitment to that ideological difference, right? So there's low and high on a continuum. And so I don't have it's still low. I'm not really responding. I'm like, oh, tell me more about that. Oh, you're talking about, okay, awesome. Like, how'd you get there? And I'm doing all the things. And then I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for having the conversation. I learned something new. But if we choose to share, what we encourage people to do are two things. Two things. Number one is to first show understanding that you listen genuinely to their perspective. Hey, Anna, thank you so much because what you shared, it really resonated with me, especially point number two. And I want to dive in deeper to that. But can I ask you, and are you open to me sharing a different perspective?
Mhm.
Now, what I've just done in asking, and I know it's countercultural today because I don't have to ask you to post on social media. I don't have to ask anything, right? But in asking you, I allow you to open up to receive what I'm going to share, and it decreases the chances that the defensive walls will come up. Now, if you say no, which can happen, it does sometimes, then why am I wasting my breath anyway? If you're not ready or if you can't receive it right now, then I may still leave the bridge open and say, hey, if you're ever open to receiving or hearing my different perspective, I'd love to have the conversation, so let me know. But if you say
Oh,
yes, the person has now opened themselves up, receive what you share, and share it in a way that the body of conversational receptiveness says, where you hedge your claims. You're not speaking in absolutes. You're not saying this always happens, but you might say something like, hey, one of the things I've seen from my perspective is that sometimes X happens. Those are ways that the researchers bore out want to continue to have conversations even when they disagree with you.
great. I really love how you can go deep with this framework.
Mm,
And I presume that because I'm seeing, of course, applications, this is in the political level, in the social level,
yeah.
and but tell us an example of how this is used within an organization, because you work a
Yeah.
lot with organizations, how this creating this framework and practicing this framework become part of their culture doing this can help organization.
Yeah, first of all, I love the question because to your point, the implications are, yes, political and societal. They're also at home. But we see this really powerfully is in the workplace. And I'm going to approach it in three ways. One is that leaders can actually create and help build this culture by asking these types of questions, by letting their teams know. And when you're going to go into a conversation that might have differing perspectives, hey, I want us to be open to hear different perspectives. And I even want you all to disagree with me. And actually saying that has helped leaders over and over again to create a culture where people are going to initially test the waters to see does that person really mean it? Let me test the waters to see what they mean. And if their hands weren't slapped, then they continue in. So leaders can create that culture by asking for that feedback directly. Number two, it's by practicing the behaviors and modeling the behaviors. So as leaders, it's an opportunity for us to engage. Now, let me give you a story because I've seen this happen in workplace teams. Now, one of the things I encountered was a young lady who helped us to understand this whole different area of our book that we weren't going to dive into. And it's a concept that we call disrespectful agreement. And she shared that early in her workforce, she just agreed. She stayed silent on things, even as she disagreed with. It didn't seem like her leader asked for disagreement, and she felt like she was conditioned to believe that if you disagreed with your leader, you were disrespecting them. And what she realized is that many years later, as she finally found her voice, that she was actually disrespecting herself in the process, that she wasn't speaking up, that she wasn't sharing her voice. And so what we advocate is challenging this concept of disrespectful agreement. And that's what happens a lot in the workplace where a person will stay silent or me, Anna, I agree with that. But behind your back, I'm like, why does she think that? That was a stupid idea. And you're either disrespecting yourself and or someone else. So in a workplace or work team, one of the things you might say during the meeting, somebody says something that you disagree with, you may, however, your place identifies this, whether you raise your hand, whether you engage, you jump in. eh, Hey, y'all, I just want to ask, are you all open to hearing a different perspective? Again, similar concept. Now people are like, oh yeah, like yeah. One of the things that I found is blah blah blah, or have you considered X, right? That's one of the great ways that we lead up is a have you considered because sometimes this is cultural. We didn't want to just make this about how this happens in the United States, because in some culture, having deference for your leaders is a very big and important thing. And so instead of saying, I think you're wrong, I think this idea is not going to work, we may say something like, have you considered? Right? Or, wow, thank you. That's a great idea that you shared. I want to ask, consider this as a way to even amplify your idea. Like, those are some things that we've seen that workplaces have been able to do no matter what culture you're in. But I will say leaders can help construct that culture by intentionally creating those spaces on their teams.
Love it, love it, love it. So, where can people go and learn more about you and your work?
Yeah, so through this, I guess I'm operating in threes today for some strange reason. So the first is how to respectfully disagree.com. And on there, you'll find a lot of great information about the books, examples. There's our respectful disagreement quotient that's coming out, so people better understand their RDQ. And second is workmeaningful.com. And that's the broader perspective of how we work with organizations to help them bring meaning to their work. And then last but not least, LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn Jones-Fosu on LinkedIn, and I love engaging with people on there and learning.
Wonderful. And I will make sure that I will put all the links in the show notes. So thank you so much for all your work and what you share with us today.
Thank you so much, Anna. And if I could add one question, right, because I want to be the student with you as well, is what's one thing that's been a part of our podcast today that really resonated with you?
I love how things flow with one another in your framework. And what you said at the example at the end about how if we silence ourselves when we disagree with something and we don't voice that, how disrespectful that can be. Because I'm part of a generation, I'm a Generation Xer, and part of the upbringing, and this also has gender things, that, okay, just stuff it up, thick skin, keep going, and how understanding the consequences of it, and the courage that I think the younger generation, Generation Z, and the newer generations are, and I think it's a very positive change, are more willing to speak out about, no, that thing didn't land well, or I want to offer my perspective. And I think I can learn from that and be more courageous to say, I disagree with, respectfully.
I love it. And thank you. I would ask more questions, but I understand that there's a time limit for the podcast as well. So know that I want to ask more questions, but I just want to say thank you for sharing that perspective with me, because it actually enhanced my view of that intersection, not only of generations, but also gender. So I appreciate you for sharing that.
Pleasure.
Expanding possibilities, the mindset zone.
If you can think of a person who will find this episode helpful, please share it. Spreading the word about the Mindset Zone podcast is very powerful. For extra resources, including information about the book and audiobook, Mindset Zone, Actualize Your Human Potential, go to mindset.zone. Yes, instead of .com is .zone. As always, I'm so grateful that you are here. Expand what's possible for you, for the ones around you, for the world.